The widow knocked on my door during the storm. What she asked left me speechless. Rain fell in heavy sheets, bouncing off the rooftops and splashing against the windows of John's small, cozy home. He sat on his old, worn couch, wrapped in a thick blanket, trying to lose himself in the pages of a book. The flickering light of a small lamp cast a warm glow across the room, offering a small comfort against the storm raging outside. The sound of the rain was constant, a rhythmic drumming that filled every corner of the house. Occasionally, a clap of thunder shook the walls, and the occasional flash of lightning illuminated the room in sudden, startling brightness. John had always loved storms from a distance. There was something thrilling about watching the power of nature from the safety of home. But tonight, the storm seemed different, more intense, almost as if it carried a message, though he could not put his finger on what it might be. He sipped slowly from a mug of hot tea, trying to calm the knot of unease that had begun to grow in his chest. The tea helped, warming him from the inside, but it could not fully drown out the storm's wild energy. He turned a page in his book, attempting to focus on the story, yet his eyes kept wandering toward the window. The wind rattled the frame, and the trees bent dangerously close to the house, their branches scratching against the glass as if they wanted to come inside. The clock ticked on, marking each second with a sound that felt louder than usual in the quiet of the stormy night. John adjusted the blanket around his shoulders and leaned back into the couch, letting out a long sigh. He thought about how calm his life had been until recently. Living alone had its comforts, yes, but it also came with its share of loneliness. He missed having someone to talk to in moments like this, someone to share the silence with. Even the most ordinary evenings now felt heavy with solitude, and storms like this only made the emptiness more apparent. Suddenly, a sound cut through the storm's chaos, a sharp, deliberate knock on the front door. John froze. His heart skipped a beat, and for a moment he could hear nothing but the storm raging outside. He wasn't expecting anyone. Visitors on nights like this were rare. A million questions raced through his mind. Who could it be at this hour? Why would someone venture out in this terrible weather? And then, a second knock, more insistent than the first, broke through his thoughts. Cautiously, John set his book aside and stood, walking toward the door. Each step was measured, as if he were preparing for something unexpected. He peered through the peephole and saw her, a woman standing there, soaked from head to toe. Her clothes clung to her thin frame, and her hair was plastered to her face by the relentless rain. She looked older than John first thought, her face lined with years of hardship, but there was a quiet strength in her eyes. She did not seem frightened of the storm or of being out in it. Rather, there was a kind of desperate determination about her, as if she had no other choice but to be there. John hesitated. He had always been cautious, but something about her made him want to help. The thought of leaving her out in the storm felt wrong. He reached for the doorknob and opened the door just a crack, careful not to let too much of the wind and rain into the house. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice steady despite the sudden nervousness he felt. The woman looked at him, her eyes glistening with a mix of rain and emotion. "Please," she said softly, her voice shaking slightly. I need shelter for a little while. The storm, it's too strong. My house is not safe right now." Her words were simple, yet they carried weight. There was an urgency to her tone, but also a calmness that made John pause. She was not panicking, not hysterical. She was just in need, and somehow he felt an immediate pull to help her. Without thinking much further, John stepped aside and opened the door wider. "Come in," he said, gesturing for her to enter. She nodded gratefully, stepping inside carefully, her shoes leaving wet prints on the floor. He quickly grabbed a towel from the bathroom and handed it to her. "Here, you're soaked," he said. She accepted it with a soft smile, wrapping it around herself and beginning to dry her hair and clothes. "Thank you," she said, her voice quiet but sincere. "I'm so sorry to disturb you like this." "It's okay," John replied, trying to sound reassuring. though he couldn't shake the feeling that something unusual was happening. He led her to the living room, where the warmth from the heater and the dry atmosphere offered a stark contrast to the storm outside. "Sit down," he said. "I'll make you some tea." While he busied himself in the kitchen, pouring water into the kettle and preparing a hot cup, he stole glances at the woman. She sat quietly on the couch, her posture upright, holding something small and wrapped in a cloth close to her chest. John noticed that she didn't look around nervously, didn't fidget. She just sat there, waiting. There was a calmness in her presence that made the room feel slightly warmer, more comforting. When he returned with the tea, she accepted it with both hands, blowing gently on the surface to cool it. "You're very kind," she said. Not many people would let a stranger in during a storm like this. John smiled faintly. "Well, I guess it's the storm. It makes you do things you normally wouldn't." He paused, feeling a little awkward. There was something mysterious about her, but he couldn't quite put his finger on it. Something about her presence demanded attention, respect, and curiosity all at once. She took a sip of her tea, and for a moment the room was silent except for the sound of the rain hitting the windows. Then she looked at him and said, "I know this is unusual, but I need your help with something very important." John raised an eyebrow, unsure what to expect. "What do you need?" he asked. The woman hesitated as if choosing her words carefully. "It's personal," she said finally, "something I've kept for a very long time. It's why I had to leave my home tonight." She opened the cloth she had been holding and revealed a small bundle of items, a few letters, some photographs, and a small, old box. "I need someone I can trust to help me deliver these," she explained. John stared at the bundle. He had expected someone seeking temporary shelter, maybe a warm place to wait out the storm. But this was different. He could feel the weight of her request pressing on him, even though he didn't yet understand it fully. He began, unsure what to say. Words seemed inadequate. The storm outside, the quiet determination in her voice, and the fragile bundle in her hands all combined to make the moment feel almost surreal. "Please," she said again, her voice soft but firm. "I wouldn't ask if it wasn't urgent. It's important to me and I need help." John took a deep breath, feeling a strange mixture of fear, curiosity, and compassion. He nodded slowly. "All right," he said finally. "I'll help you." Her eyes softened and a small, relieved smile appeared on her face. "Thank you," she whispered. "You have no idea how much this means to me." And so, on that stormy night, in a small living room illuminated by the warm glow of a lamp, two strangers sat together, one seeking help, the other offering it, and neither could have known how much that single moment would change both of their lives. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside, there was a quiet calm, a fragile connection formed in the middle of chaos. It was the kind of night that would be remembered forever, a night when the ordinary turned extraordinary, and when an unexpected knock on the door became the start of a story neither of them could forget. After John agreed to help the woman, she finally seemed to relax. She set the small bundle on the coffee table carefully, as if it were made of the most delicate glass. Her hands shook slightly, but not from fear, more from exhaustion and the chill of being out in the storm for so long. The warmth of the living room began to seep into her bones, and she let out a small sigh, finally allowing herself to breathe a little easier. John watched her quietly, unsure what to say. It was rare for someone to come into his life in such an unexpected way, especially on a night like this, and he could feel that the evening was about to become something far more significant than he had anticipated. "Would you like another cup of tea?" John asked, wanting to break the silence and make her feel more at ease. "Yes, please," she said softly. "Thank you." Her voice carried a subtle tremor, but it was not one of fear, more of nervous anticipation. While John prepared the second cup, she looked around the small living room, her eyes lingering on the walls, the framed photos of John's family he had long since lost, and the small bookshelf overflowing with well-worn novels. She seemed to study the room quietly, taking in every detail, as if trying to understand the man who had opened his door to a stranger on a stormy night. Once John returned with the tea, they sat across from each other, the storm outside creating a rhythmic backdrop to their conversation. He handed her the steaming cup, and she wrapped her hands around it, letting the heat warm her fingers. John noticed how careful she was with every movement, how deliberate and measured her actions seemed, as if she were someone who had learned to live cautiously but with intention. There was a weight about her, not just from age but from years of experiences that he could sense even without knowing the details. "I'm sorry if I startled you earlier," she said quietly, looking down at the bundle. "I wouldn't usually come to a stranger, but tonight I had no choice. The storm made everything dangerous and I couldn't wait any longer." John nodded. "It's all right. I'm glad you came. You could have waited, but I think it was better this way. Storms like this can be dangerous for anyone, especially if your house isn't safe." She nodded, her eyes briefly closing as she leaned back on the couch. Yes, that's true. My home, well, it's not what it used to be. The storm damaged part of it, and I didn't think it would be safe to stay there tonight." She paused, taking a careful sip of her tea. "I've been alone for a while. Ever since my husband passed away, I've managed on my own, but tonight felt different. I knew I had to find someone to trust, someone who could help me carry out something very important." John felt a chill run down his spine, not from the storm outside, but from the intensity in her voice. He didn't yet know what she meant by something very important, but he could tell it mattered to her deeply. He leaned forward slightly, curious but careful not to press too hard. "What is it? If you don't mind me asking," he said gently. She hesitated for a moment as if weighing her words. Then slowly she lifted the cloth that wrapped the small bundle on the coffee table. Inside were several old, slightly yellowed letters, a few photographs, and a small, intricately carved wooden box. She set them down carefully, arranging them in a neat line as if presenting something sacred. "These belong to my husband," she explained, her voice almost a whisper. "He passed away many years ago, but these are pieces of his life I never shared with anyone. They were meant for someone else, someone he trusted deeply." John's curiosity grew with every word. He picked up one of the letters, careful not to disturb the fragile paper. The handwriting was elegant and deliberate, with a style that spoke of a time long past. "And you want me to deliver these?" he asked, trying to process what she was asking. "Yes," she replied softly, nodding. "I've kept them all these years, but now I need someone to help me. Someone who is willing to listen, to understand, and to ensure these reach the right person. My husband always believed in keeping promises, and I intend to honor his wishes, no matter how long it takes." John sat back, staring at the letters and photographs. There was a quiet gravity in the room, a sense that he was witnessing the beginning of something that had been waiting years to be completed. He realized that this was not just about delivering letters. It was about trust, about respect, and about helping someone fulfill a final act of love and loyalty. "Do you want me to deliver them tonight?" he asked, his voice calm but steady. "Yes," she said, a hint of urgency in her eyes. "The storm may be dangerous, but I can't wait any longer. The person these belong to, I don't know how much time we have. I need them to receive this before it's too late." She looked at John with a quiet intensity that made him nod. He could see how much this mattered to her, and he knew there was no turning back now. For a few moments they sat in silence, sipping their tea and listening to the storm outside. The rain fell in heavy sheets, and the wind rattled the windows, but inside, the room felt calm and purposeful. John found himself studying the woman closely, noticing the small details. The way her fingers gently held the letters, the careful way she placed the photographs on the table, the soft sighs she let out as if releasing years of pent-up memories. He could tell that she was more than just a stranger in need. She was someone carrying a lifetime of stories, someone whose life had been shaped by love, loss, and resilience. "Would you like to tell me about him?" John asked after a while, breaking the quiet. "Your husband, I mean." She smiled faintly, her eyes reflecting both joy and sorrow. "Yes, I would like that." She took a deep breath, as if preparing to revisit memories that were both precious and painful. His name was Robert. He was kind, gentle, and strong in ways I only came to understand after he was gone. He had a way of seeing the best in people, even when they couldn't see it themselves. And he had a heart that never stopped caring, a heart that always wanted to help others. John listened intently, sensing the depth of her emotions. There was a softness in her voice, a warmth that seemed to fill the room despite the storm outside. He could picture her husband through her words, a man whose life had touched hers in ways that left a lasting mark. "We shared many years together," she continued, her eyes distant as if seeing him in her mind. "We laughed, we cried, we built a life together that was simple but full of love. And then, one day, he was gone just like that. I was left with the memories and these letters, photographs, and keepsakes. They were his final wishes, things he wanted to pass on to someone else, but I never knew how to do it until now." John felt a lump in his throat. He realized that he was not just helping her deliver letters. He was becoming part of a story that spanned decades, a story of love, trust, and the quiet strength of a woman determined to honor her husband's memory. She looked at him, her eyes pleading but calm. "I trust you, John. I don't know why, but I do. I feel that you can help me do this, and that's why I came to you tonight." John nodded slowly. He felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders, but he also felt a sense of purpose. This was not something he could take lightly. It was more than just a task. It was a chance to make a real difference in someone's life, to help fulfill a promise that had been waiting for years. For the next hour, they talked quietly, discussing the letters, the photographs, and the small box. She explained the significance of each item, the memories attached to them, and the importance of ensuring they reached the right person. John asked questions carefully, wanting to understand fully, and she answered patiently, her voice calm but filled with emotion. The storm outside continued to rage, but inside, a quiet determination grew between them, a shared understanding that what they were about to do mattered more than anything else in the world. By the time the rain began to lighten slightly, John felt ready. He could see the resolve in the woman's eyes, and he understood why she had come to him. She wasn't just seeking shelter, she was seeking a partner in completing something deeply meaningful, and he knew that he could not turn away. "All right," he said finally, standing up. "Let's do this. Let's make sure your husband's wishes are honored." A small, relieved smile spread across her face, and she nodded. "Thank you," she whispered. "You have no idea how much this means to me." And with that, they began to prepare for the journey ahead. The storm still raged outside, but inside, there was a quiet sense of purpose. Two strangers, brought together by circumstance and trust, were about to embark on a mission that would connect the past to the present, that would fulfill a promise made long ago, and that would change their lives forever. The quiet living room seemed almost sacred that night. Outside, the storm still battered the streets, lightning illuminating the sky in sharp, brief flashes. But inside, time felt slower, as if every moment carried the weight of years. John and the widow sat facing each other, the small bundle resting on the coffee table between them. The rain drummed softly on the roof, like a gentle reminder that the outside world existed, yet it felt distant compared to the gravity of what was about to unfold. John looked at her, unsure how to begin. He had expected a simple request for help, perhaps to deliver letters or photographs, but there was something in the way she held herself, the way she looked at him, that hinted at a deeper story. He could see the quiet intensity in her eyes, a determination that made him realize this was no ordinary task. "I'm ready to help," John said, finally breaking the silence. I need to understand exactly what you want me to do." The widow took a deep breath, her fingers gently brushing over the bundle. For a moment, she didn't speak, and John could feel the hesitation in the room. It was as if she were weighing her words carefully, ensuring she could trust him with what she was about to reveal. Finally, she looked at him, her eyes locking with his, and her voice, though soft, carried a quiet urgency. "What I need from you," she began, "is not something simple. It's not just delivering letters. It's something much more personal. Something I've never shared with anyone before." John leaned forward slightly, curious but cautious. "You can trust me," he said quietly. "I want to help." She nodded, a faint smile touching her lips, but her eyes remained serious. "These items," she said, gesturing toward the bundle, "belong to my husband. They are more than just memories. They are pieces of his life, pieces of a story that never reached its conclusion. There is someone he cared deeply about, someone from his past, who has never received what he wanted them to have, and now I need you to help me deliver them." John felt a lump form in his throat. He had been expecting something important, yes, but not this. The weight of responsibility settled heavily on his shoulders. This was not just about helping a neighbor. This was about fulfilling a promise, about bridging a gap that had remained unfilled for decades. "Who is it?" he asked gently, careful not to startle her. She hesitated again, her fingers tightening around the bundle. "I cannot tell you too much," she admitted. "But I can tell you this. It is someone very close to him, someone he trusted above all others. These letters, these photographs, even the small box, everything is meant to be delivered to this person. It is the last thing I can do for him, the last way I can honor his wishes." John nodded slowly, taking in her words. He could see the love and respect she held for her late husband, the dedication to fulfilling his final desires. The way she spoke, the careful way she handled the items, it was clear that this was not just a task, it was a mission of the heart. He realized that the moment he agreed to help, he had become part of something much larger than himself. "What do you want me to do first?" he asked. He wanted to show her that he was committed, that he understood the seriousness of the task. She picked up the letters carefully, one by one, and handed them to him. "Read them," she said softly. "Not out loud, but just enough so you understand the message." Each letter contains memories, confessions, and stories he wanted to share. They are not just words. They are pieces of his soul, pieces of the life he shared with me, pieces of a life he wanted this person to know. John took the letters, handling them as if they were made of glass. He could feel the texture of the paper, slightly brittle with age, the careful inked handwriting that spoke of a man who had taken great care in recording his thoughts. As he read through the first letter, he felt the emotion behind every word. It was clear that these letters were written with love, with honesty, and with a deep desire to connect across time. The widow watched him closely, her eyes softening as he read. She had carried these items for so many years, holding onto them tightly, knowing that one day someone would help her complete what had begun long ago. Now, she could feel the weight of that responsibility being shared. For the first time in a long time, she felt hope, not just for herself, but for the memory of her husband and the life he had lived. After a few moments, she spoke again. "The box," she said, reaching for the small wooden container, contained something very personal. Something that meant the world to him, and now it must reach its intended recipient. "It is fragile and it is precious. Please handle it with care." John took the box gently, turning it over in his hands, examining the delicate carvings that adorned its surface. It was small, no bigger than a palm, but he could sense the history and emotion embedded in it. He looked up at her, meeting her gaze. "I will," he promised. The widow nodded, her lips pressing together in a quiet expression of relief. "Thank you," she said. "You have no idea how much this means to me." Her voice carried a quiet emotion, one that made John realize how much this moment mattered, not just for her, but for the memory of the man who had entrusted her with these items. As they prepared to leave, she explained the directions carefully, ensuring that John understood the route they needed to take. The person they were seeking lived several streets away, in a small, quiet neighborhood that had not changed much over the years. She told him a few details about the person, enough to recognize them, but kept some information private, trusting him to follow her instructions faithfully. The storm outside had begun to lighten slightly, but the rain still fell steadily, and the wind continued to howl through the trees. John grabbed an umbrella, opening it to shield both of them from the worst of the weather. They stepped outside together, the small bundle safely tucked under her arm. She moved with a quiet confidence, her steps careful and deliberate, despite the slippery streets and the chill of the rain. John walked beside her, guiding her when necessary, feeling the weight of responsibility, but also the sense of purpose that came with it. As they walked through the wet streets, the widow began to share more about her husband, about the life they had built together, and about the moments that had defined their years. John listened intently, captivated by her stories, by the vivid way she spoke about love, friendship, and the small acts of kindness that had shaped their lives. It was clear that these letters and the box were not just objects. They were the culmination of a life filled with meaning, with connections that had endured despite the passage of time. After a while, the widow stopped walking and turned to John, her eyes meeting his. "I know this may seem unusual," she said softly, "but I have waited for someone like you, someone I could trust, someone willing to help me honor his memory. Tonight, you are that person." John felt a mixture of humility and awe. He had never imagined that a single knock on his door could lead to such a profound experience. He realized that this was more than just helping a stranger. It was about becoming part of a story that had been waiting decades to be completed, about helping a woman fulfill a promise that had defined her life for many years. For a moment, they stood in the quiet of the storm's aftermath, the rain falling softly around them, the streets glistening with water, reflecting the dim glow of streetlights. It was a surreal moment, suspended between the past and the present, between the life that had been lived and the promise that was about to be fulfilled. John understood that what they were about to do mattered deeply, not just for the widow but for the memory of her husband, for the person who had waited all these years to receive what was rightfully theirs. Finally, she spoke again, her voice firm but gentle. "Are you ready?" John nodded, gripping the bundle a little tighter, feeling the weight of history and emotion in his hands. "I'm ready," he said. And so, together, they began the journey through the rain-soaked streets, two strangers bound by trust, by purpose, and by the quiet determination to do what was right. The storm may have raged outside, but inside there was a calm, a focus, a shared understanding that the night held something extraordinary. They were about to step into a story that had waited for years to be told, a story of love, loyalty, and the power of keeping promises, no matter how long it took. Every step they took felt meaningful, every movement deliberate, as if the universe had guided this encounter. John realized that he was no longer just helping a stranger. He was becoming a part of history, a witness to the fulfillment of a life's final wishes. And he knew, without a doubt, that nothing would ever make this night ordinary again. The rain had slowed to a steady drizzle by the time John and the widow left the warmth of his home. The streets glistened with water, reflecting the dim orange glow of streetlights, and the wind still whispered through the trees, shaking loose the last of the storm's fury. John held the umbrella, shielding them both, while the small bundle of letters, photographs, and the carved wooden box rested securely in her arms. There was a quiet tension in the air, a mix of anticipation and apprehension that made each step feel heavier than usual. The widow moved with remarkable confidence for someone her age, guiding John through the winding streets. Occasionally, she would glance down an alley or at a distant house, as if ensuring they were heading the right way. Her expression was calm, but there was an intensity in her eyes that made John feel both curious and slightly uneasy. He had come to realize that this was no ordinary errand. The gravity of the task, the weight of the items they carried, and the stormy night itself all combined to make the journey feel like something out of a storybook. Yet it was real, and it was happening right now. As they walked, she began to speak softly, her voice almost blending with the sound of the rain. "My husband was unlike anyone I've ever met," she began. "He had a way of seeing the world differently, of caring for people in ways that most would never understand. And he trusted people completely. That trust extended not just to me, but to someone very special in his life, a friend from his past, someone who meant more to him than words could ever express." John listened carefully, feeling the intensity of her words. He had expected letters and photographs, but now he realized that this journey was about more than delivering items. It was about bridging a connection that had been lost for years, about honoring a bond that had survived time and distance. He looked at the small bundle again, wondering how much history it held, how many untold stories, and how many emotions had been carefully folded into each piece of paper, each photograph, each tiny object. "Why now?" John asked gently. "Why bring them tonight during this storm?" She hesitated, looking down at the bundle. "Because," she said finally, "life is unpredictable. There is no guarantee that tomorrow will come. I have carried these for many years, waiting for the right moment, waiting for someone I could trust. And tonight felt like the only moment that mattered." They walked in silence for a few moments, the sound of their footsteps mingling with the soft patter of rain on the ground. John felt the weight of the responsibility settle even more firmly on his shoulders. He realized that he was not just helping a widow deliver items. He was stepping into a story that had been waiting decades to be completed. The storm had brought them together, but what came next would define the night and perhaps leave a mark on both their lives forever. Finally, they reached a narrow, quiet street lined with older homes. The lights in most of the houses were off, and the streets were empty, as if the entire neighborhood had vanished beneath the rain. The widow stopped and looked up at a small, unassuming house set slightly back from the street. She turned to John, her eyes filled with a mixture of determination and vulnerability. "This is the place," she said softly, "the person who must receive these lives here. But I need you to understand something first." She paused, taking a deep breath. "This is not just about delivering letters. It's about trust, honesty, and understanding. What I am about to ask you, it may seem strange, even impossible, but I have no one else to turn to. I need you to do this for me, for him, for the memory of a promise kept." John felt his heart beat faster. He had expected a serious task, but there was something in her tone that suggested the request would be extraordinary. "I'll do my best," he said quietly, unsure what she meant but wanting to show her he was committed. She looked at him, her eyes steady. "I need you to go inside first," she said. "You must deliver these items to the person alone. I cannot go inside myself. Not yet. It's important that you are the one who brings them in, that you explain everything gently, and that you make sure they are received with understanding and care." John blinked, momentarily speechless. He had expected to walk up to a doorstep, perhaps hand over letters, maybe introduce himself. But she was asking him to enter someone else's home during a storm, to deliver not just objects, but memories, confessions, and emotions that had been carefully preserved for decades. The enormity of her request sank in, and for a moment he felt a pang of fear. This was far beyond anything he had ever done before. Seeing his hesitation, she reached out and placed a hand on his arm, her grip gentle but firm. "I know it is unusual," she said softly. "I wouldn't ask if it weren't necessary. I have carried these items for so long and they must reach the right hands. You are the only person I trust to do this, the only person I can rely on tonight. Will you help me?" John swallowed hard. The storm outside seemed to echo the tension he felt inside. He thought about the risk, the uncertainty, the fear of entering a stranger's home, but then he looked at her, at the hope in her eyes, at the trust she had placed in him, and he knew he could not say no. "Yes," he said finally, his voice firm, "I'll do it." Her expression softened immediately, relief washing over her features. "Thank you," she whispered. "You have no idea how much this means to me. You are helping me fulfill a promise I made long ago, a promise to a man I loved more than anything in the world." John nodded, trying to steady his own emotions. He adjusted the umbrella, held the bundle carefully, and walked up to the small house with her following at a respectful distance. The porch light flickered as he reached for the doorbell. His heart pounded in his chest, and he could feel the weight of history and emotion pressing down on him. He rang the bell once, then twice, and stepped back slightly. Moments later, the door opened to reveal an elderly man standing in the doorway. His face lit up with curiosity and surprise as he took in the sight of John standing in the rain, holding a bundle of letters, photographs, and a small wooden box. "Good evening," John said politely, his voice calm but carrying a sense of purpose. "I have something very important to deliver on behalf of someone you once knew. It is personal, and I was asked to bring it to you tonight." The man looked at him, confused but intrigued. He stepped aside, gesturing for John to come in. "Come inside," he said. "I'm not sure I understand, but please, come in out of the rain." John stepped inside, carrying the bundle carefully. He could feel the weight of the moment. The storm outside, now a distant memory compared to the intensity of what was happening within the walls of this small home. The elderly man motioned for him to place the items on a table, and John did so, arranging them neatly as if preparing for something sacred. "Would you like me to explain?" John asked gently, turning to the man. The man nodded, his expression a mix of curiosity and anticipation. John began to speak, recounting the story of the widow, her late husband, and the trust placed in him to deliver these items. He spoke with care, emphasizing the love, respect, and loyalty that had defined their lives and the importance of honoring a promise long kept. As he spoke, the man's eyes widened and his hands trembled slightly. He reached for the letters, reading a few lines with growing astonishment and emotion. The photographs, the box, the delicate words, they were all pieces of a life he had once known, fragments of memories and connections that had been lost over time. He could not speak at first, overwhelmed by the depth of what he was seeing and hearing. John watched silently, feeling the intensity of the moment. This was the point of the journey, the culmination of the widow's trust and his own courage. He realized that this was more than just delivering letters. It was about reconnecting lives, about bridging the past and present, and about honoring a promise that had waited decades to be fulfilled. Finally, the elderly man looked up, his eyes glistening with tears. I don't know what to say," he whispered. These were meant for me. All these years I never knew. I thought they were lost forever." John nodded, feeling a deep sense of relief and fulfillment. "They were preserved carefully," he said softly. "They were meant to reach you when the time was right. And tonight they have." The man reached for the small wooden box, opening it with trembling hands. Inside was a delicate locket, a symbol of friendship and love that had endured the test of time. He held it close to his chest, overcome by emotion, and looked at John with gratitude that words could not fully express. John realized then that the widow's request, the shocking, almost impossible task, had been fulfilled. What had seemed extraordinary, even overwhelming, was now complete. The storm outside had brought them together, but it was the courage, trust, and compassion of two strangers that had made the impossible possible. The elderly man looked up at John again, his voice choked with emotion. "I will never forget this," he said. "Thank you for bringing these to me. You have done something incredible tonight." John smiled softly, feeling the warmth of accomplishment and the quiet satisfaction of helping someone honor a lifetime of love and loyalty. He glanced at the doorway, wondering where the widow was, knowing that her trust had made this moment possible. He understood then that some acts of kindness, some moments of courage, and some gestures of trust could leave a mark on lives forever. The elderly man sat quietly at the small kitchen table, the locket and letters spread out before him. His hands trembled slightly as he held each item, turning them over carefully, studying every detail. He looked up at John, eyes glistening with emotion, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. Outside, the rain had stopped entirely, leaving the streets shiny and reflective under the dim streetlights. The storm that had seemed so threatening hours earlier had passed, but inside this small home, a different kind of storm, one of emotions long held back, was finally finding release. John watched quietly, feeling the weight of the moment settle in his chest. He had only meant to help a stranger on a stormy night, but what had unfolded was far beyond anything he could have imagined. He realized that this was not just a delivery. It was a reconnection, a moment where lives separated by years, loss, and silence were finally brought together again. He felt a deep sense of fulfillment, but also humility, understanding that sometimes life's most extraordinary experiences come when least expected. The elderly man looked down at the photographs next, his fingers lingering over each one. They were simple images, snapshots of a life that had once been shared. A man and a woman smiling on a park bench, two friends laughing over a cup of tea, a younger version of the widow and her late husband celebrating a small holiday with joy and contentment. As he examined them, memories flooded back, emotions long buried resurfacing in waves. His lips trembled and he let out a quiet sigh, overwhelmed by the depth of the connection these items represented. "These," he began slowly, voice thick with emotion, "these were meant for me. I never knew he wanted me to have them." He paused, taking a deep breath, his hands clutching the letters as if they were lifelines. "I thought so many things were lost forever. I never imagined this night." John nodded quietly, careful not to interrupt the delicate flow of emotion. "They were preserved carefully," he said softly. "The widow entrusted me with them because they were meant to reach you. She wanted to ensure that her husband's final wishes were honored and that you received what was meant for you." The man's eyes glistened with tears as he looked at John. You did more than just deliver these. You've helped me reconnect with a life I thought was gone. You've given me a chance to remember, to honor him, and to feel his presence again." He looked at the locket in his hands, a small, delicate piece of craftsmanship that had survived the years intact. This is more than just an object. It's a symbol of friendship, love, and trust that has endured despite everything. John felt a lump in his throat. He had expected gratitude, perhaps relief, but he had not anticipated the depth of emotion, the weight of history, and the profound impact this moment would have on both of them. He realized that some nights, some acts of kindness, and some decisions, like opening a door to a stranger on a stormy night, can lead to experiences that stay with you forever. The elderly man set the locket down carefully, then picked up one of the letters. He read a few lines, pausing frequently, his lips moving silently as he absorbed every word. "These words, they are so personal," he whispered. "I can feel his thoughts, his feelings, his life, all of it preserved in these letters. I never knew how much he wanted me to understand." He looked at John again, tears streaming down his face. "I don't know how to thank you. You've done something truly remarkable." John shook his head gently. "No thanks are needed," he said softly. "I was just the person he trusted to deliver them. The real credit goes to the widow and her husband. I only followed through on what they asked. What you're feeling now, it's because of the trust and care they placed in these items and in me." The elderly man nodded slowly, wiping a tear from his cheek. He set the letters and photographs aside and looked at John with a quiet intensity. "You've done more than I can ever describe. You've brought closure, healing, and connection. You've allowed me to reconnect with a life I thought I had lost forever. That is priceless." For a few moments, silence filled the room. It was not awkward or uncomfortable. It was a silence heavy with meaning, a silence where words were not needed because emotion spoke louder than anything could. Outside, the storm had vanished completely, leaving behind a calm, almost magical night. Inside, two strangers, one young, one old, stood witness to a reunion of hearts and memories that had waited years to happen. John glanced toward the door, thinking of the widow waiting outside, trusting him to carry out this final act. He felt a deep sense of respect for her courage, her love, and her dedication to her late husband. She had carried these items for decades, keeping them safe, waiting for the right moment and the right person to ensure their delivery. And now, because of trust and determination, that moment had arrived. The elderly man finally spoke again, his voice steadier now, filled with gratitude and a quiet joy. "I wish I could thank her myself," he said. "She trusted you, and through you, she has honored him. I will never forget this. I promise I will treasure these letters, these photographs, and the locket, and I will honor the memories and the wishes they carry." John nodded, a warm feeling spreading through him. "That is all anyone could ask for," he said. "It's more than enough." The man took a deep breath and leaned back slightly, holding the locket to his chest. "This night, it will stay with me forever. I've been given a gift beyond words. A connection to the past, to a friend I thought I had lost, and to the love that has endured all these years. And you are a part of that story now. I will never forget your kindness." John felt a quiet satisfaction, a deep sense of fulfillment. He had set out on this stormy night simply to help a stranger, but what had unfolded was far more profound. He realized that sometimes life presents opportunities not just to help, but to witness history, to connect lives, and to be part of something far greater than oneself. After a while, the elderly man carefully gathered the letters and photographs, placing them back into the small box along with the locket. He looked at John one last time, gratitude and emotion shining in his eyes. "You've done something remarkable tonight. Because of you, decades of memories, promises, and love have finally found their place. I will never forget this night. Thank you truly, from the bottom of my heart." John smiled softly, feeling the warmth of human connection in a way he had rarely experienced. "It was my honor," he said. "I was just the messenger. The real story belongs to you, the widow and her husband." The elderly man nodded, holding the box close. "I will treasure this always," he said, "and I will honor their memory every single day. This has changed my life tonight. I can feel it." John stepped toward the door, preparing to leave, and the man reached out, gently shaking his hand. "Please thank her for me," he said. "Tell her that her trust, her love, and her courage made this possible. Tell her that she has fulfilled a promise that will never be forgotten." John nodded. "I will," he said, "and I will tell her exactly that." As John stepped back out into the calm night, the rain had stopped completely. The streets shimmered under the streetlights, reflecting the quiet beauty of a world washed clean by the storm. He glanced back at the small house, knowing that inside, a lifetime of memories had been honored, and a promise long kept had finally found its way home. Walking toward the widow, who waited patiently under the streetlight, John felt a quiet sense of peace. He had stepped into a story he had never expected to be part of, a story of love, trust, and courage that had been waiting for decades. And now he understood the true power of human connection, how trust and compassion could bridge years, heal hearts, and honor lives in ways nothing else could. When he returned the bundle to her, she smiled softly, her eyes reflecting relief and gratitude. "It is done," John said quietly. "Everything has reached the right hands." Her expression softened even more, and she nodded. "Thank you," she whispered, a tear sliding down her cheek. "You have no idea how much this means to me. You've helped me honor him, and you've made a difference in ways you cannot even imagine." John smiled, feeling the warmth of human kindness and the quiet satisfaction of a task completed with care and integrity. "It was my honor," he said. "You trusted me, and I'm glad I could help." For a long moment they stood together under the streetlight, the night calm, serene, and full of meaning. The storm was over, but the impact of that night, the journey, the trust, and the love that had been honored would remain with them forever. They both knew that life had a way of testing courage and trust, and that sometimes, in the most unexpected moments, ordinary people could become part of extraordinary stories. And on that night, in the quiet aftermath of a storm, two strangers, brought together by chance, trust, and compassion, had witnessed the power of human connection, the beauty of promises kept, and the enduring strength of love that transcends time. It was a night neither of them would ever forget.